of tackles and missing a number of top guys in this class. And I think that'll be interesting because LRB and Heupel are really good friends, and LRB has been with Heupel a lot of steps along the way. And I think that's one of those decisions that could end up being, a really tough one for Heupel to make. But we'll see what happens. And then the one other thing I would say on that, and this isn't even to excuse LRB because, look, the top guys they were going after were all 4-stars, so obviously that's who they wanted. But I will always say, you brought back a few years ago under Pruitt that 4 5-stars and then 1 4-star, or maybe even it was all 5 stars on that offensive line. I don't think that matters as much at offensive line as it does other positions, just because it's so hard to project. A lot of these rankings, it's not like basketball where you're seeing the best players play each other in AAU. A lot of these kids aren't playing kids their size at the high school level, and then at the camps, they're not in full pads. So to me, it's really hard to draw in, especially the tackles spot's different, which makes sense when we're talking about the guys, the big time recruits Tennessee's whiffed on at tackle. But the interior guys, especially, you can find, I think, good interior guys anywhere. I mean, look at Javonte Spraggins, was a low 3-star recruit, and he's been a good one for him. Cooper Mays, I think, was a teetering 3-4 star, and now he's an all SEC lineman. And you look at, Jackson Lampley, and that doesn't mean he can't help him out down the road, but he was a pretty high 4-star recruit, and he hasn't found the field yet. So when you look at the interior guys, I think you can find a lot of different guys to help out there. But you're right, it's going to be interesting to see what happens to LRB in the long term.
We shall see. Well, let's look at a big transfer who's I'm not really worried about the program for this one. I don't know if you've heard about this. Have you seen this? Tennessee baseball might be pretty good. Might be in good hands with Tony Vitello. And even though you lose your entire outfield, it's a good problem to have where you have that. Like, that's just good recruiting bulletin board where that many guys go in the draft and sign. There was one story, though, about that was not great, which was Cam Sewell. And folks were wondering what he was going to do, because the rotation's pretty much done. Like, we know who the big three will be on the weekend. So it's like, well, all he can really do, because the portal window closed, and he kind of has to pick. Like, he was kind of in a weird spot, and he was obviously really important in that Florida series, really important in the postseason for Tennessee this year. I am curious to see what his role is going to be, but I think that's a pretty big stabilizer for this group, just for injuries or whatever. Like, getting Cam Sewell back, I think, was an underrated development this offseason, where like the Jack Alexander just wild card, where you're like, okay, what are the odds this happens, and that he signs and goes somewhere else, and then Seth Stevenson getting drafted where he did, and you lose Stevenson, lose Lawson, this, that, and the other. But I think that's a pretty big under the radar win, right?
It's massive. I mean, I don't think you can really overstate how big it is, just because, I probably hear me go on a tangent here, but we'll two thoughts. One, when you look at Camden Sewell, 4 years in the program, bullpen guy, he started a couple SEC tournament games, never been a starter. Might not think this is, like you said, he's not really have a huge path to being a weekend starter this year. He can't be some sort of stud. From the minute this kid stepped on campus, he has been, in my estimation, no worse at any moment than Tennessee's 5th best pitcher. Not 5th best bullpen arm, 5th best pitcher. I mean, he's been one of the absolute best guys all 3 seasons that weren't affected by COVID. Over 45 innings, ERA under 3. Really, really good, really effective. Was the Swiss Army knife for him last year, who kind of when you got in the middle SEC play and you started to see some cracks in the armor for a few of those freshman starters, and they couldn't get into deep into games, Camden Sewell was there to throw 3 or 4 innings and really stabilize something in a weekend game when things were shaky. I think he's, to me, just as good as Drew Beam. I would give Chase Burns and Chase Dolan there kind of the edge over him. But I think that's just a massive get to bring back. And then when you look, the second point here, when you look at Tennessee's bullpen, it was they needed a stabilizer. You lose Ben Choice. You lose Redmond Walsh. You lose Mark McLaughlin. Feel like you lose Will Mabry. You lose 4 of your 5 or 6 top arms in the bullpen. And now there's talent there. You bring Zach Joyce in, who obviously Ben Joyce's brother, who had hadn't played the last few years and quit playing baseball after committing to Tennessee out of Walter State. You have Wyatt Evans, who has shown potential, had a great summer in the Cape Cod League. You have Xander Seacrest, who's shown potential as a midweek starter. You have options. You have guys. Obviously, you have Kirby Cannell's kind of the one guy back. But still a lot of question marks there. Even though you feel good about those guys, not a lot of those guys have gone out and proved that they could be really good SEC relievers. Now you're bringing a guy who threw more innings for you than anybody out of the bullpen last year, 50 innings in Camden Sewell, and is the complete Swiss Army knife. He can close. He can come in for long middle relief outings. I think it's just a massive, massive get for Tennessee. And to me, just as tough, maybe as losing Reggie Crawford was, and how, not that that was a huge surprise, but if he would have come back, he'd have probably been a top 5 draft pick. And Camden Sewell is not going to be a top 5 draft pick next year by any means. But I think that's Camden Sewell coming back is maybe not quite as big as getting Reggie Crawford would have been, but to me, it's right up there, kind of neck and neck. I think it's just huge.
He also took a full-time job.
He did.
Ben McKee had a really good piece on VolQuest about this, but he was ready to just walk away from baseball altogether. So I think it's a pretty big thing for all the reasons that you just laid out here, to get him back and talk him out of it and just be like, hey man, those COVID extra years, they giveth and they taketh away on a multitude of fronts. Also, Griffin Merritt commits. He transfers from Cincinnati as a grad transfer, not just a transfer. And I think he led the AAC in homers last year, right?
Yep.
If I remember correctly. And you had a really good write-up about him in Rocky Top Insider. But he is someone that you just another big win you needed to fill this outfield, because that's the thing. Is Tennessee has talent to fill the Jordan Beck, Steph Stevenson, Drew Gilbert spots, but you would like to have it not just be unproven guys out there. You would like to have at least one name that you're like, all right, I know what I have here, and to take some of the pressure off whoever it is out in the outfield for next year, whether it's Christian Moore, whoever, like Jared Dickey we thought might be out there, but Jared Dickey, it looks like is going to be behind the plate with Jack Alexander going to the pros. I am very curious to see what his upside though is, because there's a lot of incoming third base spot, shortstop, and outfield now. Big time transfers for very different skill sets, and just you're bringing a lot of folks together because it's different. This is going to be a different look with a lot of new faces that have all proven it at different stops, but that's not kind of what happened here the last couple of years in Tennessee, where we saw Jordan, that photo of Drew Gilbert when he's first on campus, and how much his body and just his whole look changed over the course of his time in Knoxville. Those guys all grew up basically together on this roster, and this team next year is it's going to be a lot of new guys who were there for a very short amount of time that we just hope to